Get started. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar entitled How to Build a Bot. This is the second in our new to RPA Lunch and Learn series, and we're glad that you be here today. So I just have a couple housekeeping items. The first is you can use my email, marylou.darrow@whitelightgroup.com. That's at the bottom of each slide if you want to send me your questions that way, or you can also send them in the chat box, which is at the right of your screen. So just click on the little chat icon and send it off, and we will answer them later in the presentation. You are all muted when you logged in, and we'll keep you muted throughout the presentation just to keep everything consistent. And we will be recording this webinar. We'll make it available to everybody after this event. So I want to thank everybody for joining us. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our presenter today, who is Phil Toso. He is a business analyst with White Light Group, who will be presenting today's content. So enjoy the presentation, and Phil, take it away.
Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us on your lunch hour. We're going to talk about today is RPA Learning Webinar Series for how to build a bot. To get into the agenda, we're going to talk a little bit first about White Light Group, so you understand a little bit about who we are. If you've been part of these webinar series, you've probably seen this one before. We also have an area in our agenda typically for the RPA basics. We're leaving it out on this one. If you want to review, go to our YouTube, White Light Group's YouTube site, and you'll be able to see all the other webinars and learn a little bit more about the basics at that time. We're going to focus today on the steps to build a bot, what that takes. So we'll go over some question and answers at the end, and then if you still have time in your day, we have some bonus features. We'll actually have a video of us building a bot in UiPath. So a little bit about White Light Group. White Light Group is a consulting firm. We use software solutions to optimize business processes, and we've been doing this for just under 20 years now. We have offices in Wisconsin and Illinois, and our customers are primarily headquartered in the Midwest. However, we do work with global companies as well. As an Oracle partner, we have worked with many clients to provide support and assistance with JD Edwards' ERP platform. As time went on, RPA was a natural progression for White Light Group, as everything we do seems to be very process focused. And our three primary areas of business are JD Edwards Consulting, ERP software integration, and last but not least, what we're going to talk about today is RPA, robotic process automation. As far as RPA is concerned, we have partnered with 3 solution providers: Automation Anywhere, UiPath, and Kofax. If you'd like to talk more in detail about these, these slides and everything we covered today, our contact information will be presented throughout the slides. Also, you can contact us through info@whitelightgroup.com. So build a bot steps. We tried to break it down into 5 steps. So there's an opportunity assessment, feasibility assessment, how complex that bot is, and determining ROI, and then finally we go into some bot design and standards. I'm going to go into each one of these in more detail as we go through. So there's an opportunity assessment portion of it. So there's 3 basic areas that get you to that, hey, what actions are we going to take? What's our next step? So the idea gathering aspect is we want to make sure that, this is a, lack of better terminology, a group effort. There's an IT team and the business team. A lot of those seem to be very isolated and work in silos. And in these kind of scenarios, they need to work very closely together, because IT needs to be able to complete some of the tasks, and the business needs to be able to provide steps to completing those tasks. There's certainly a knowledge gap on both sides, and at this point in time, it's really important that these folks within the organization are on the same page. During that opportunity assessment, that idea generating. So idea generating can come from multiple resources. There's, you can focus more on some of the users, the boots on the ground, being able to do analysis on what their process is and what their business rules are and what they're completing, to be able to generate some ideas for RPA solutions, as well as there is an abundant amount of ideas and use cases that already exist out there that are very common in RPA. And while that's great, there are, if not hundreds, if not thousands of ideas for RPA solutions. What's really important in this opportunity assessment step is that you identify what your business goals are. So your business goals is to obviously improve revenue. Is it to lower overhead costs? Is it to increase employee satisfaction? Is it to decrease turnover rates? All of those kind of things RPA can affect. And by listing out your business goals and identifying or assigning, if you will, a percentage of, what's more important, or some sort of rating system of what's important to your business, it allows you to kind of almost play connect the dots from your ideas to your business goals. And it really takes a little bit more, it provides a little more clarity in your process. So you're able to say, well, all of these ideas that we're coming up with for RPA solutions align with our top 3 business goals. Well, those would probably be at the top of your list then, right? So that allows you to take action to move on to the next step, which is a feasibility checklist or a fit for automation. So when looking at those ideas that you have now moved on to the next step, you want to identify, is there any tangible results that we're going to get from this? What type of process is it? Are we working closely with finance and HR? What's more important to our business? Is this process stable? So when you ask, is this process stable, this really takes you down the rabbit hole of business rules. So does this process have business rules? I always use just simple example as approving a sales order, or approving payments and accounts payable. So is the rule that the manufacturer delivered the product on time? Is the rule that doesn't have any manufacturer defects, checkbox clicked? And is the rule that if the purchase order is for, or the payment is for over, $100,000, it goes through a different approval process? There's all kinds of things like that. And if there's business rules attached to it, then you can determine that RPA process is feasible and stable. If there is a scenario where it makes a human decision, where it could go one way or the other, depending on how that person views that scenario, that's more of a person decision, a human decision that is made. And RPA would not be able to replicate a human decision to go one way or the other without business rules. And that is where the feasibility checklist really comes into play. So if you're focusing on one process, it's not worth your time or effort to move forward in building that bot, because it wouldn't feasibly be able to be built, because we can't mimic the actual human decision making. It can mimic human interaction, just not decision making. So once you have that list, now we move on to the complexity checklist. There are numerous, there's templates that we can go over with you for this complexity checklist, but I just picked out 4 of them that are probably the most popular. So, how many screens are we using? Basically, how many steps, how many different screens are we using? Some of them might include 25 steps, some of them might include 200, some 500. You want to stay underneath maybe that 500 number from a step point. How many types of applications are being used? In addition to how many types of applications are being used, what kind of business logic scenarios are there? We talked about that approval process. Well, there goes through many business logic scenarios. Is it greater or less than 100,000? Where do we move that next step to? Is the checkbox clicked? Is the manufacturer defects that we didn't notice any and a quality check went through? Whatever that case may be, there's decisions that need to be made to either exit the bot and send an email to somebody that something needs some human decision, or do we keep on moving forward and take it to the next step of that business process? And then how many outputs and inputs are there going to be? So that it doesn't determine whether it's feasible or not, it just determines the complexity of it. And the complexity of the bot really determines how long it's going to take and how much effort it's going to take to build and deploy and train folks for this bot. So that leads us into segue into ROI. So you're going to use that information that you've captured to determine ROI based on how much effort was involved in it, and then what kind of ROI are you getting? Are you replacing any FTEs? Are you replacing just time of those FTEs? Is there a salary dollar amount? What is that time worth to you? Is it freeing up these folks to do more important roles? Are we freeing up these folks to not have to be so task oriented and therefore they're more satisfied with their job and employee turnover goes down? Well, however you want, you can calculate that ROI based on the effort it takes to build that bot. That's how you're going to determine when your ROI is going to show up. ROI can be up to 200% in 1 year on bots. We found it to be very, very fluid on ROI, it seems. So, and then the kind of the final step in the build is your design standards. So I picked out 3 for design standards for RPA standards, and there's also external application standards, and we'll talk about those in just a sec. So RPA standards, reusable components. If you look at different platforms, they might call them snippets, they might call them metabots, things like that. Reusable components tend to bring the effort for building a bot, so that complexity factor brings it down the more reusable components you have. A very common reusable component might say, all right, on say of our 20 bots we're building, 18 of them log into our ERP application every time. So if you have ever played around in any of the community versions, you're going to find that there's more than one way to complete a task. And to have it completed based on a standard and the same way every time, you save that as a reusable component. So next time you want to put that component into a bot, you can just drag and drop it in there and you don't have to complete that entire task again. So reusable components are very important. You want to be able to identify what those are going to be going forward so you can create those standards for them. Another standard is for loops. Loops is something that it's a repetitive step. Very popular in any RPA implementation are loops. The reason is they really drive the ROI because loops are just a repetitive task. Say somebody copies something from one application, pastes it in another application, saves it, and then takes the information they just captured, puts it in an Excel document or a table. Now they go back and they go to the next record and they complete those exact same steps, put it in the Excel record, copy and paste it. And they continue, say they do that for the exact same thing for 100 records. You would want to make some sort of loop that identifies there's a loop of completing the task, there's a loop of completing the task and pasting in Excel, and then once the tasks are complete, then there's a task just for sending that email of, say, that Excel document, or saying that the bot is complete. However, inside those loops, there is more than one way of doing things, and that is where you design your standards on what works best for your business and create that loop. And you can use that loop again and use it as a reusable component. And then the last one I want to touch on is error handling. Error handling is really what it describes. The word kind of describes it very well. So that means you go to, say, you look for data and you're supposed to copy and paste it. And then you go into that record and oops, there's nothing there to copy. So maybe it shoots an error out and says, hey, I want to stop this bot because I ran into an error. Something wasn't there that I thought was going to be there. And you don't want the bot to stop. You maybe want it to step over to the next process and go through the next loop. Well, you'd want to set some sort of error handling to say, if there's nothing there, don't throw an error. Just let us know in the report in Excel that nothing was there, and then go on to the next loop. So that would be one example of error handling. Another example would be there's three main types when use cases for error handling. So perhaps a page doesn't load completely very quickly. So you're going through some process, you're going through your testing procedures. In RPA, they call it debugging. So you're going through these testing procedures, and maybe you put a 5 or 10 second delay on that, just because you don't really know what's delaying this bot from completing its tasks. So let's give it some seconds. Let's find out what's happening. So is the object that we're trying to click on, the HTML, not there? That tag not there, or perhaps the page hasn't completely fully refreshed yet, and it's trying to click on something or copy or scrape something off of the page. Either way, error handling, you can find out what's happening by putting that delay in. Once you find out what's happening, maybe you do need to wait for the object to show up, or maybe you do need to wait for that page to refresh. So you can change your error handling, shoot page refresh or object availability, but you want to take out that how many 10-second delay when you move to production. You only want to use those delays in your testing environment or your testing of the bot. So those are definitely three components that are very commonly used throughout all RPA solutioning, and developing standards around these types of components inside of your bot building procedures is very important. And then we talk a little bit about external applications. External applications are like, for example, if you're using Outlook, you're going to want to understand that you need to grab that Outlook server as well as your outgoing and incoming port, depending on if that bot is sending an email or receiving an email. We talk about user security and systems lists. So any system that is accessing, whether it's your ERP environment, your CRM, or any external ticketing systems that it's going to be creating based on any issues or scenarios, you're going to need to have a separate user for each one of those. So you don't just use your user ID or password. This bot is like another employee and treated as such. So if something's completed inside a specific environment or system, and you need to go back and audit it, you'll be able to see, hey, robot number 1 completed this task, not John Doe. So it's really important that you follow some of these design standards as you're building the bot. So with all that said, you kind of wonder, well, how do I get started? So here at White Light Group, we do offer a free 2-hour getting started workshop. It can be on many different subject matters, but for this one, if you wanted to say, how do I build a bot? We would go through for 2 hours and not go through hypotheticals like we are throughout our presentation today. We would want to dive into your business specifically and set up an opportunity assessment template, set up a simplified feasibility template, set up some structure for identifying complexities of bots, and share with you a little bit more extensive education on terminology for bot design and that design process and what that looks like. Obviously, we can take you through all these steps fully, but if you're looking to do this on your own and you want to at least get some sort of like guidance to jumpstart that process, I think this 2-hour getting started workshop can be very beneficial to organizations when trying to get organized to get started doing this here. So with that said, Mary Lou, are there any questions in your email or chat box that I can identify at this time?
Yeah. Actually got a couple. The first is a little bit of a comment regarding complexity, and that is that Complexity is also highly influenced by the stability of applications. So you have to also consider how often do they change, requiring rework of the bot. And that was really more an addition to what you were saying than a question, but I think that's a point well taken when you're thinking about complexity.
Yeah, I'd like to comment on that comment. There are, we ran into scenarios where, right, there are upgrades or changes made to an environment or customizations, and a lot of times when that happens, you need to go through testing procedures, right? And you go through all of these different scenarios, and keep in mind, you can build bots that go through these testing procedures. So when there is a change made, you can run, a series of X amount of bots in your queue and test all of these and see if there's any errors. Instead of having the users all complete these tasks. So I've seen that scenario present itself as well.
Okay, so there's a couple here. Let's see, the first one is, how long does it take to build a bot for a typical accounts payable task?
Great question. I think we can stick to, what we talked about in our last webinar. Once you're ready to go, it's about a 4 to 6 week process once you've gone through all the steps and you're ready to build. It can also vary. I mean, it depends on how integral or detailed and granular you want to make that process. I mean, are we just comparing the invoice to the PO for the dollar amount and the PO number, or are we going through utilizing that approval process with a dollar amount, and did the manufacturer deliver it with no manufacturer defects, and what are those approval processes? It really kind of depends on the use case, but a basic one, yeah, 4 to 6 weeks, we'll leave it at that, and then I think there would be just more discussion to be had around that.
Okay, all right, here's the next one. It sounds like you guys are using a couple different RPA solutions. Is it easier to build a bot in one solution over another?
The short answer to that is no, it's not easier to build in one or the other by any means. We have 3 of them because there's different scenarios from how an organization might want to implement. They want to implement, something as a service, and I just want to buy a bot and have you manage it, or do I want to do an implementation in many different business units within my organization, and I need many bots, and I need more developers that are more citizen developers that are completing these tasks, as attended bots on their computer. There's just different scenarios on what the business goals are and what they're going to use these bots for that really more or less dictate what system is used, not really the difficulty of building the bot by any means.
Okay, let's see, this one is, can you build one bot and have it run multiple tasks?
Yes and no. Obviously, one bot can do many tasks. We in our last webinar we did a currency bot, and the currency bot not only goes into JD Edwards, it identifies the currency calculation methodology. It identifies if the date is today's date. It goes out to a website and copies a rate and creates a new record in JD Edwards. It takes all the information and changes that it made, it puts it in an Excel table, it emails it out to somebody. So I don't know if that's one task or many tasks. I would assume that's many tasks, but you wouldn't want one bot to do that task as well as AP automation and have it all go in the same bot. When you grab a license can run up to 24 hours. So if you have one bot running for 2 hours and you have another bot running for 20 minutes, that's fine. You can have separate bots, to do separate tasks. You wouldn't want to overload one bot to complete multiple tasks in different business areas of your business for pretty kind of valid reasons. I like to think of it, I always use analogies. If you're building a house, you're not going to carve your house out of one piece of wood. right? You're going to have 2x4s, you're going to have shingles, you're going to have flooring materials, you're going to have doors and windows, and all those all come from separate areas and are pre-built, kind of like your reusable components, and they're inserted in. So if you need to change something or an error happens and my window breaks, I don't have to replace my whole house, I just need to replace that window. So you really want to create bots that are task focused in one business area, and just know that one license, you can still run multiple bots, they just can't run concurrently on one license.
Okay. And then finally, do you have a calculator to help figure out ROI and when you actually start seeing savings?
Great question. I've seen organizations really value ROI in so many different ways. I alluded to earlier about, people see it in, well, if I create, employee satisfaction, then I don't have to pay for rehiring, recruiting, and training. You got ROI because I had 15 people in my accounts payable department, and I really only needed 13, and we were able to remove those two, members. Not that we want people to have less jobs. Maybe they were to transfer them over to doing more meaningful work. So that you can make it from a salary standpoint. If it's a customer service business goal that you have, and your churn rate and cost of acquisition cost, and if it, you can determine by making this change that we're going to have less churn and lower acquisition costs, you can really convert that into your ROI. It really depends on what your business goals are and how you view value of that bot. What's a very big constant in that aspect is how much effort is. That's why it's so important to do that complexity step, because we want to understand how much work it's going to take to build, manage, and deploy this bot. So that is more of a constant, and everything else is how that organization views value of that, of the results of that bot.
Okay, and then actually there's two more that came in the chat window. So this is great, I love your answers, Phil, so we're going to keep on going. The first is, are any of the RPA tools that you use cross-platform, in quotes?
RPA tools that use cross-platform, mean we use two RPA tools to complete a task? That's the way I'm reading it. The answer to that would be no, we wouldn't use two different RPA tools. We just have three because, they have different functionality. I don't want to say functionality. They have different implications on the business goals of that company and how they want to manage their environments. And there's pros and cons to each one, but I think I'm answering that question. I hope I did.
Okay, and then let's see. So this is in the chat window. I did publish it, so if you wanted to look at it, but I'll read it out. It says, I'm looking to understand the difference between a bot and something like SSIS or some kind of .NET script that can be kicked off automatically on a job scheduler.
I think the answer to this question is a bot task can be kicked off by a trigger. So it doesn't have to be run on a schedule, and it doesn't have to be an attended bot, which are the two most popular ones. It can be ran on a trigger. So when something else happens, then the bot runs. I think that might answer the question. So we would just have to identify what that trigger is and what the task is, and connect some of those dots.
Okay, and then the follow-up to that was this person also then add to that saying, I understand one of the main differences is interacting with some enterprise apps, but are there other big differences?
Just building the bot, they're all a little bit different. They all end up doing the same thing. I'm not going to be able to say one can build a bot that the other one can't. Absolutely not. I like to compare it, if you're on my last one, I compare it to cars. I travel a lot, so I rent a lot of cars, and I'm also a car guy, so here we go. So when you get into your car, you're at home and you drive to the grocery store or whatever the case is, you know where everything's at. You know where the radio's at, you know how to change the radio station, you know where your cruise control is at, you know if you have to push a button or if you need to flip a switch or you need to turn a key to start your car. You know where the headlights and the windshield wipers are. All of them are very similar. They have different terminologies to what the same thing is. And they may be in different spots and work slightly differently on how you configure them, whether it's loops or whether it's next tag loops or Excel loops. They they all do the same thing. They just do it in a different configuration. So I hope that answers your question, but I think they're just like cars. They still get you from point A to point B. They're all trucks. You can put big loads on them. You can, carry data. You can drop kids off at school, but it's just you do it differently. The seat belts might work differently, things like that. So that would be my analogy to that question.
Okay, and then a follow-up going back to the cross-platform question. By cross-platform, they meant different types of computing platforms.
I don't see any problems with that.
Okay, yeah. And then
if you can do it on your computer, and you can complete tasks on your computer between systems, and then you send it to a different operating system, or whatever the case is. Same thing. However, it does work. The bots only work on Windows.
And that was the last question we had was, are the RPA tools available on Mac or Linux?
No, yeah. They're right. I mean, they say coming soon for Mac, but they've been saying coming soon for some time now. So I'm not holding my breath by any means. So right now they only operate on the Windows platform, Windows operating system.
Okay, and that was it. Those were all great questions, I thought. So thanks for answering those, Phil.
Great. Thank you guys for all your questions. We do have a little bonus feature if you want to see me building a bot in UiPath. Guys, this is just building a bot. This is very simplified. You'll be able to see some of the outputs and things like that nature. But the bot is about me creating a bot to tell you what time is it in Minnesota. So very basic. So it's really nothing to do with business, but you will be able to see some of the basic inner workings of this. So I'll go ahead and get it started here. I'm actually my name is Phil. Going to mute this because I think I can walk you through what's going on here. So building a bot to execute it. We're going to be using the web recorder. We're going to be using variables and identifying what they are. And we're going to write an output. So in doing this, the first thing we're going to do is in the recording area, we're going to do a web record. What that means is we're going to record all of our clicks and typing in a browser. So I go ahead and I click on recording, and then I want to name this recording here in UiPath. And I'll just name it, what time is it in Minnesota, and I'll click on create. I'm going to go ahead and click on open browser. So it opens a browser for me, and then I'm going to go ahead and start recording my clicks. So I go ahead and I type into the Google search bar. I go ahead and type in current time in Minnesota. And I go ahead and check that box empty field. That's just because if there was anything there for any reason, I just want to make sure that's an empty field that I'm clicking into. So it types it in for me, and then I go ahead and I click on Google search. And it asks me, do you want to set an anchor? An anchor might be like in relation to where the big Google HTML tag is you see up there. Where is Google search at? Pretty sure Google search and this bot's going to be in the same spot every time. So I just go ahead and I ignore this and I move on. And then what I really want to capture now is that 12:37 p.m. there. So if I highlight 12:37 p.m., I know I can get that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here, I hit escape, and then I hit copy text. And all I do is I actually click in on that HTML tag. Just right There, that's all I have to do. And now that I'm done, I'll just go ahead and save and exit. And it just created this entire bot for me just by doing that. So you can see in the middle is kind of the meat and potatoes, and the left-hand side, I can drop and drag different actions in, but I did a recording. So if I go down to that time, 12:37 p.m., I want to make sure I'm not looking for 12:37 p.m. every time because the time changes on a minute basis, right? So I go ahead and I highlight 12:37 p.m. and I put an asterisk in there so it looks for anything in that field. The next thing I want to do is I drag over here, right line, right there, and I drag it over here. So that right line is going to be my output. But before I put my output in, this variable, I need to identify what it is. So if I go and click on my variables, I can go into my div variable and I will label it time in Minnesota with camel, I guess labeling, if you will. And then I'll make it a generic value with UiPath. There's other areas like scope and default. We're not going to get into that right now. It's another video. But now I'm ready to write my line. So my line is going to be in quotation marks, current time in Minnesota. So that's what it's going to tell me. But I want to concatenate it with my variable that I created. So my variable you can see right there is time in Minnesota. So I click on the plus button and I go ahead and hit time in Minnesota. The last thing I want to do is I don't want that browser to be open every time I do this. So I'm going to go ahead and close browser. So I have close application on the right. And I'm going to drag and drop it over into my workspace. And I'm going to click on the little link that says indicate element inside browser. And I just go ahead and I just click on the browser and that's it. Now I'm ready to go ahead and save and run my bot. So I go ahead and I run it. You can see it's going to open up a new browser. It's going to capture 12:37 p.m. Actually, it's going to capture 12:42. And it is now done running. And you can see down in the left-hand corner, it says time in Minnesota is 12:42 p.m. And I just want to validate that asterisk that I made that change to, went ahead and validated, and we're good to go. And that is building a really basic bot. You can see how fast I was able to build that. It was 12:37 p.m. when I had the other screen up, and it was 12:42 p.m. when I captured it. So it's very fluid programs out there that you're able to complete these tasks with the drag and drop and just a small amount of coding and concatenating in that scenario, and you're ready to go. So thanks a lot for sticking around. For those of you that did, I hope you enjoyed the demonstration, how basic it may be. And please join us on July 1st. We're going to have another part of this webinar series is RPA Orchestrator. Which one or both? So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. My name is phil.toso@whitelightgroup.com, or you can just contact us with any questions at info@whitelightgroup.com, whitelightgrp.com. Thank you very much. Thanks for joining. We'll talk to you soon.